We got some really religious people that are trying to murder. They're going to commit murder in spite of God or anything else, in spite of God's Son. That's where we are. Now we're in John the 18th chapter. John chapter 18. Now remember, Jesus was arrested early Wednesday morning in our time. The next day, Thursday, was a Sabbath. There were basically 3 holy days. There was the Sabbath, the holy day of the week. Friday was a regular Sabbath till Saturday. And then Sunday is the Feast of First Fruits, which was another feast day in this week. John 19, and Judas also, which betrayed him, knew the place, for Jesus oftentimes resorted there with the disciples. And Judas, and having received a band of men and officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, he came there with lanterns and torches and weapons, breaking the law. Everything they're doing is unlawful under the law of Moses. Jesus, therefore, knowing all these things that should come upon him, went forth and said unto them, Who do you seek? And they answered him, Jesus of Nazareth. And Jesus said unto them, I am he. And Judas also, which betrayed him, stood with them. And as soon as he had said unto them, I am he, they went backwards and fell on the ground. They were so shocked they fell down. They didn't need Judas at all. Jesus was surrendering unto the will of God. The eternal plan of salvation. They asked them again and told them, I am he. If you therefore seek me, let these go away safely. Let his church, his disciples, go away safely. That the saying might be fulfilled which he spoke of them, which they gave me, I have not lost one. Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and smote the high priest's servant. Now here, John tells you who it was. Why did John tell us it was Peter? John wrote his gospel, was one of the last of the gospels, and when John wrote his gospel, Peter was already dead. Now, the book of Acts was possibly a what we call a defense of Paul before Caesar. And it was a legal document. Every one of these Gospels were legal documents in their time. And if Matthew or Mark or Luke had said, Peter smote off the high priest's servant's ear, Peter could have been arrested and crucified right there. But now Peter is dead. And so John writes down and puts his name, who did it. Peter, having a sword, drew it and smote the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. Right ear again, we know which ear. And the servant's name was Malchus. We know now the person's name. Now, I've never done a sermon like this before where I read every gospel account of this. This is the first time. I've done it separately many times. But this is the first time that we put all four gospels together. Then Jesus said unto Peter, put up your sword in its sheath. The cup which the Father has given me, shall I not drink it? And then John in the 18th chapter. And verse 12 now. Then the bands of the captain and the officers of the Jews took Jesus and bound him. There were thousands of people here now. Thousands. They went out like they were going against an insurrection, which he wasn't doing. He wasn't doing anything wrong. He led him away to Annas first, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas the high priest that same year. And Caiaphas was he which gave the counsel to the Jews that it was expedient for one man should die for the people. Now, God sometimes uses these, you know, God caused Balaam to prophesy, didn't he? Balaam was a false prophet. He was a pagan prophet. but God calls him to prophesy. And now we have a murderer of the Messiah, and God had put some words in his mouth. It was exceeding for one man to die for the people. And the high priest then asked Jesus of his disciples and of his doctrine. And Jesus answered him, I spoke openly in the world. I've ever taught in the synagogues and in the temple, whether the Jews always resort to in secret ways, I have said nothing. What do you ask me? Ask them which heard me. Ask the people which heard me. Ask the other people besides my churches. Ask those that were there. Ask Pontius Pilate. What I've said unto them, behold, they know what I said. And when he had spoken in this way, one of the officers which stood by struck Jesus with the palm of his hand, saying, answer to the high priest. So he struck Jehovah God, the Son of Man, the Son of Woman, and he hit him in the face, hit him in the mouth with his open hand, slapped him. And you couldn't do that. This was also illegal. They could have taken that man and actually stoned him for what he did. And Jesus answered them, if I have spoken evil, bear witness of the evil. But if good, why did you smite me? And now, we go to Matthew, Chronology. This is Wednesday. Early Wednesday morning. Jesus and they that had laid hold on Jesus led him away to Caiaphas the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were. He went to Annas. Now he goes before Caiaphas. Then he goes before the Sanhedrin. I hope that you're learning something from these messages. Now the chief priests and the elders of all the council sought false witness. They are seeking perjury. Perjury is a death sentence. Every one of these people here were guilty of a capital crime. They were seeking counsel and sought false witness against Jesus to put him to death. They wanted to murder him. But they found none. Though many false witnesses had come, yet they didn't find any that could make sense. At the last, 2 more false witnesses came. Bought and paid for false witnesses now. And he said, this fellow said that I am able to destroy the temple of God and build it in 3 days. We know that Jesus is talking about his body, and they knew that. But now they're going to bring this false charges against him. And the false priest arose and said unto him, why don't you say anything? Aren't you going to answer? What about these things that these false witnesses or these witnesses are witnessing against you? And Jesus held his peace. And the high priest answered and said unto him, I adjure you by the living God. Oh. Spit. He said, I adjure you by the living God, and here the living God is standing in front of them, that you tell us whether you be the Christ, the Son of God. And Jesus said unto him, you have said it. Nevertheless, I say unto you, hereafter you shall see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power, and coming in the clouds of heaven. You know when that's going to take place? That's going to be way over here in the tribulation period. When the Antichrist is about to destroy Israel, then they will scream and holler, blessed is he that came, blessed and holy is he that came in the name of the Lord, and he will appear to save them. You know, Jesus, God elected Israel to be, this is something, now put this under your hat. I want you to listen, think about this for about the next 50 years, okay? I have been thinking about it for over 50 years. The election of Israel. Israel was elected as a nation, saved and lost people. They were still God's nation. They were his elected people. The good, the bad, and the ugly, okay? Israel was elected even here to do this dirty job. Think about that for a while. You shall see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven, and the high priest tore his clothes, saying, He has spoken blasphemy. What further need we have any witnesses? Behold now, you've heard him blaspheme. He said that he was the Son of God. If he was the Son of God, if he wasn't the Son of God, they could have crucified him, but he was. He proved to them that he was the Son of God. All of his messianic credentials were in place. See, what do you think, he said? He is guilty of death. Then they began to spit in his face. And they began to beat him. And others beat him with the palms of their hands, saying, Prophesy unto us, you Christ. Who is it that smote you? Who is it that has slapped you? Who has beat you? I guarantee you one thing, when they come before the great white throne judgment, every blow will be recounted before them. Mark the 14th chapter. Now, Mark is looking at Jesus as a servant, isn't he? And they led Jesus away to the high priest, and with him were assembled all the chief priests and the elders and the scribes, and the chief priests and all the council. The council there is what? The Sanhedrin. Sought for witness against him to put him to death, but they didn't find any yet. For many bare false witness against him, but their witnesses agreed not together. They couldn't get their act together. There arose a certain people to bear false witness against him, saying, We heard him say that I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and within 3 days I will build another made without hands. That's not what he said. It was false testimony. This is perjury. This is a death sentence to them. But neither so did their witnesses agree together. And the high priest stood right up in the middle and asked Jesus, saying, Answer me. What about these witnesses? What about what they say about you? But he held his peace. And he said nothing. And again the high priest answered, or questioned him, interrogated him, and said unto him, Are you the Christ, the Son of God, the Son of the Blessed? And Jesus said, I am. And you shall see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power, coming in the clouds of heaven. Elected Israel was still elected. They're set aside right now, but Israel will bring forth what we call the millennial kingdom on earth for 1,000 years. They're elected to do that. Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, What need we have any further witness? We've heard him blaspheme. What do you think? And they all condemned him to be guilty of death. And they kept on spitting on him and to cover his face and to slap him and beat him. And saying unto him, Prophesy. And the servants did strike him in the palms of their hands. Luke 21 or 22. Luke now looks upon Jesus as the kinsman redeemer, as our son of woman, the Son of Man. And they took him and they led him and brought him unto the high priest's house. And Peter followed far way off. It tells one more thing here now. Then did it say anything about Peter before? No. But now Peter is way standing off. And the men that held Jesus mocked him and smote him. And when they had blindfolded him, they struck him in the face and asked and said unto him, Prophesy, who is it that smote you? Who is striking you? And many other things blasphemously spoke against him. Blasphemy. They were blaspheming the Son of God. John the 18th chapter. Now Annas had sent him bound unto Caiaphas the high priest's home. I know I have been there. Sharon's been there. We saw where this happened. Now, Matthew the 26th chapter. Matthew looks upon Jesus as what? The King of Israel. The rightful heir and King of Israel. But Peter followed him afar off into the high priest's palace. And he went in and sat with the servants to see the end of what was going to happen. Now Peter sat without in the palace, and a damsel came unto him, saying, You also were with Jesus of Galilee. And he denied before them, saying that I do not know what you're talking about. And when he was gone out a little further into the porch, another maid saw him and said unto him, You were there. This fellow was with Jesus of Nazareth. And again he denied him with an oath. He swore by God that he didn't know Jesus. This is the Pope of the Catholic Church, remember. And they said, Surely you're one of them. Your accent betrays you. Your accent betrays you. And they began to curse and to swear and saying, I know not the man. Peter began to curse and to swear, I know not the man. And immediately the rooster crowed. And Peter remembered the word of Jesus, which said unto him, Before the cock crows twice, you shall deny me 3 times. And he went out and he wept bitterly. Now let's go back and look at this. A cock crows every 3 hours, 24 hours a day. Is that right, Larry? You went out there and you witnessed this. Every 3 hours they crow. We get them excited in the meanwhile, they crow in the meanwhile, but 12, 3, 6, and 9, they crow. So now what? Jesus actually told Peter, he told him, actually, like us looking at the clock, he said, the cock will crow at 9 o'clock. The clock will crow at 3 o'clock, and the clock will, 12 o'clock, and the cock will crow at 3 o'clock. Now between 9 a.m. and 3 a.m. and 9 p.m. and 3 a.m. in the morning, that cock is going to crow 3 times. Right when he denied him the 3rd time, right before 3 a.m., the cock crowed again. Peter denied him, and the cock crowed the 3rd time. Before the cock crows, you'll deny me 3 times. Between 12 a.m. and 3 a.m., Peter denied Jesus 3 times. John the 18th chapter. And Simon Peter followed Jesus and did, this is John now. We were just looking at Luke. John portrays Jesus as Jehovah, God of the Old Testament. And Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so that another disciple, that the disciple was known unto the high priest, and went in with Jesus into the palace of the high priest. And Peter stood at the door without, outside, and went out, that the other disciple which was known unto the high priest spoke unto her that kept the door, and brought in Peter. Another tells us more detail about it, doesn't it? Then this young lady that was a doorkeeper, she's like the maid, said unto Peter, Are you not also one of this man's disciples? And he said, I am not. And the servants of the officers stood there, who had made a fire of coals, for it was cold. And they warmed themselves, and Peter stood with them and warmed himself. I heard sermons many times, many sermons about warming yourself at the devil's fire. And Simon Peter stood and warmed himself, and they said, therefore unto him, Are you not one of those, or one of his disciples? And he denied it, said, I am not. And one of the servants of the high priest, being his kinsman, whose ear Peter had cut off, said, Did I not see you in the garden with him? Then Peter denied again, and immediately the cock crowed. between 12 a.m. and 3 a.m., Peter denied the Lord 3 times. And Jesus said, you'll deny me between 12 a.m. and 3 a.m. Before the cock crows twice, you'll deny me 3 times. Now, Matthew the 27th chapter. When the morning had come, all the chief priests and the elders of the people took counsel against Jesus to put him to death. They're bound determined to murder him. And when they had bound him, they led him away and delivered him unto Pontius Pilate. That's Matthew 27, 1 and 2. Now Mark, the 15th chapter. Matthew looks at him, the king of Israel. Mark looks at him as a servant. And immediately, in the morning, the chief priest held a consultation with the elders and scribes and the whole council, and bound Jesus and carried him away and delivered him unto Pilate. Luke, the 22nd chapter. Now, Luke looks at him as the Son of Man, our kinsman redeemer, our Goel. And as soon as it was day, the elders of the people and chief priests and the scribes came together and led him unto the council, saying, unto day, it's daylight now. It's Wednesday morning, it's just after daylight. Now they're going to go pester Pilate. They're going to pester Pilate. Now Pilate knows Jesus. And they said, are you the Christ? Tell us. And he said unto them, if I tell you, you will not believe. And if I also asked you, you will not answer me, nor will you let me go. Hereafter shall the Son of Man sit on the right hand of the power of God. And they all said, are you the Son of God? He said to them, ye say that I am. You said it. And they said, what need have we of any further witness? We ourselves have heard from his own lips, his own mouth. Now, Matthew, the 27th chapter, and verse number 3. Now we go back to Judas Iscariot. Judas, praise Jehovah, that's what his name means. Iscariot, Judas Iscariot means a man from Carioth. Down not too far from Hebron. Then Judas, which had betrayed him, when he saw that he was condemned, repented himself, and brought again the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders. Now, listen to their religious hypocrisy. Saying, I have sinned and I have betrayed the innocent blood. And they said, what is this to us? See to it yourself. And he cast down the pieces of silver in the Holy of Holies in the temple. Now, when Judas Iscariot went into the Holy of Holies, he didn't go into the temple. He could go into the temple area, but he walked right into that temple door. He walked for the holy place and threw the 30 pieces of silver into the Holy of Holies, which was a death sentence for himself. And he departed and went out and he hung himself. And the chief priests took the silver pieces and said, it is not lawful to put them in the treasury because it is the price of blood. Religious hypocrites. They're going to keep the law, but they're going to get their CPAs to figure out how they can do something with it. They took the silver pieces and said it's not lawful to put them in the treasury because it's the price of blood. And they took counsel and brought with them the potter's field to bury strangers in, because they had to do it. The law required that they have a place to bury strangers. The potter's field, is a poor people's cemetery. Wherefore that field is called the field of blood unto this day. Then it was fulfilled that which was spoken by the prophet, saying, they took the 30 pieces of silver and the price of him that was valued, whom they had, the children of Israel did value, and they gave them for the potter's field as the Lord appointed me. Acts the 1st chapter now. Thou this man purchased a field with a reward of iniquity. And falling headlong, he burst asunder in the midst, and all his bowels gushed out. And it was known unto all the dwellers of Jerusalem, inasmuch that the field is called in their name Hakedelmiah. That is to say, the field of blood. Akadelmia. Dam is the word for blood. Aka is the field of blood. Matthew looking at Jesus as the King of Israel, the rightful heir. In Matthew the 27th chapter and verse number 11, and Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the King of the Jews?" And Jesus said unto him, "You said it. You said it. I am." Did Pontius Pilate know that Jesus was the King of the Jews? Yes, he did. And when he was accused of the high priest and elders, he answered nothing. Then Pilate said unto him, "Don't you hear how many things that they witness against you?" And he answered and said, "Never, not a word." And the governor just marveled. Remember, if we read Pilate's letter to Tiberius, his father-in-law, and he recounted the whole thing, he said that this man spoke differently. He was greater than the greatest sage, the greatest prophet of all times. And he marveled. Pontius Pilate had told Jesus in an interview with him that he had. He said, "These people are trying to kill you, but I will protect you." And Jesus told him, he said, "Oh son, prince of this earth." He was a prince. He was a ruler. He said, "When my time comes, there's nothing you can do." He said, "I will not allow this." He said, "There's nothing you can do. It is destined. It is elected to be so." Mark the 15th chapter, Mark looking at Jesus as the servant. And Pilate asked him, "Are you the King of the Jews?" And he answered him and said unto him, "You said so." And the chief priests accused him of many things, but he answered not one thing. And Pilate asked him again, saying, "You're not answering anything that they witness against you." And Jesus yet answered nothing, so Pilate marveled. Luke the 23rd chapter, Luke looking at Jesus as the Son of Man, the Goel, our kinsman redeemer. And the whole multitude of them arose and led him unto Pilate. And they began to accuse him. Actually, it says they kept on accusing him. "We found this fellow perverting the nation and forbidding to give tribute to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ the King." Jesus didn't do this. Pontius Pilate knew this story. He knew it. He had his man come back and tell him what he had told him. And Pilate asked him, saying, "Are you the King of the Jews?" And he answered and said unto him, "You said it." Then Pilate said to the chief priests and to the people, "I find no fault in him. I denounce that he is innocent." 5 times Pilate denounced Jesus was innocent. 5 times. Now, when you brought charges, according to the law of Moses, when you brought charges against a man and he was considered innocent, the charges that you brought against him, you were supposed to be, if it was a death penalty, you were supposed to be killed. These people are guilty of death. And they were there the more fierce, saying, "He stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Jewry, beginning from Galilee unto this place." John the 18th chapter. Then he led Jesus away from Caiaphas into the hall of judgment, the praetorium. And I know, Sharon, that you've been there, so have I, on the very steps where Jesus stood. And it was early in the judgment hall, lest they should defile themselves, but they might eat the Passover, that they might defile themselves. The Passover was going to begin at 6 p.m. that day. One day earlier, Jesus had taken the Passover with them. They were more fierce. And they led Jesus from Caiaphas into the hall of judgment. Pilate then went out unto them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered and said unto him, "If he were not a malefactor, we would not have brought him to you and delivered him unto you, if he wasn't a criminal." Then Pilate said unto them, "Take him, judge him according to your law." You go out there and judge him according to your law. They could not perform capital punishment, could they? They had lost that shortly after Jesus was born, they lost the power of capital punishment. So he knew that they couldn't kill him. And the Jews therefore said unto him, It is not lawful for us to put any man to death. The scepter had departed from Judah when Jesus was born. That the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spoke, signifying the death he should die. And then Pilate entered into the judgment hall again, and called Jesus, and said unto him, Are you the king of the Jews? Jesus answered him, You said it. You said it yourself. He had said it himself before, when he had been interviewed before. And Pilate answered, I am not a Jew. Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you unto me. What have you done? Jesus answered, My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from here. Pilate therefore said unto him, Are you a king then? Jesus answered, You said it, that I am a king. To this end I was born, and for this cause I came into the world, that I should bear witness unto the truth. Every one that is of the truth hears my voice. And Pilate said unto him, What is truth? And when he had said this, he went up again unto the Jews, and said unto them, I find no fault in him. I find him innocent. I find him innocent. Now Jesus is going to go before Herod Antipas. Not Herod the Great, but Herod Antipas. And when Pilate heard of Galilee, he asked whether the man was a Galilean. And as soon as he knew that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him down to Herod. 3 times he was tried with the Jews, 3 times he's tried before Pilate, before Herod, and back before Pilate again. Now Herod was himself in Jerusalem at that time. And when Herod saw Jesus, he was exceeding glad, for he was desirous to see him of a long season, because he had heard many things of him, and he hoped that he had seen some miracle done by him. And he questioned him, interrogated him in many words, but he did not answer him a word. Herod didn't have any authority to rule over him. Jesus should have been in his place. And the chief priests and the scribes stood and vehemently accused him. And Herod, with his men of war, set him at naught, and mocked him, and arrayed him in a gorgeous robe, and sent him again unto Pilate. Now Herod is one that put the fancy robe on Jesus. And that same day, Pilate and Herod were made friends together, for before they were enmity with each other. What a story, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now he's going to go back to Pilate. He's going to go back to Pilate. This is the story of our salvation. He said, For this reason I came unto the world. For this reason he died. In Psalm 22 he said, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. That's the first verse. That's Hebrew. Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, that is Aramaic. Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, that's Hebrew. Matthew spoke it in Hebrew. And the other writer spoke it in Aramaic, as it was heard. Jesus came to die for us. He came into this world to die. This Easter Sunday, that the people have set aside as the resurrection of Jesus, Jesus did die on the cross. He was in the grave for at least 72 hours, and then he rose again. He died for our sins and was raised for our justification. And we'll start the rest of this story, the next message. Our Father, we send this message out for your honor and glory. I thank you for your words. I thank you for the ability to stand up here and tell the story of the death, burial, and resurrection of our Savior. Please use it wherever it goes. Please forgive me where I fail you. In Jesus' name.